All right, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately our guest speaker, Mr. Dwight Farmer, came down with a bad cold. He sounded terrible yesterday, so I kind of reached out to Councilman DeSteph and Councilman Moss and asked them if they would go ahead and speak today. And at this time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up Councilman DeSteph, and later on we're going to hear from Councilman Moss. Bill?
Thanks, Ken. And John and I worked on the budget together, and what we decided to do was I was going to kind of frame the conversation, and then John's going to go through some of the cost reductions. And we've hit somewhere around 75 million this year for cost reductions. And again, they're not things that, from a priority standpoint, impact our basic core services of government. The first things we have to fund with this budget, no matter what, every year, are the things that are required constitutionally. Public safety, safety and security of our citizens, education, and the welfare of human services. So if you listen to the things we're going to talk about today, there are more things that are wants than needs. And as we've looked at what's happened over the last few years, and I'll go through some of the statistics, you'll notice that a lot of the things that are in here are more wants than needs. So just like in your home budget, you've got to look at, what are the economic indicators, what are the right things to do, and where do you trim? So again, some of the things, and I'm just going to hit some of the basic things so you know what's going up. The city's in the same position you are with a lot of the same issues. Healthcare, city pension costs, so pension, healthcare, fuel, all of those are going up this year. Our VRS pension basically has gone in from 2010 to 2012-13 proposed. City side 38 million to 75 million. I'm sorry, that's school side. The city side has gone from 50 million to 60.9. Part of that was catching up for the VRS holiday, where they went 1 year without putting into the VRS. So let's look at something else here. For Virginia, Virginia Beach, Newport News, metropolitan area, the average unleaded and diesel cost combined, this is again a yearly cost as of March of 2011, was $3.62. Well, we're seeing that creep up right around $4 a gallon right now. Since the city buys its fuel on futures, our average price was about $2.34. We still spend a tremendous amount of money on fuel every year. Last year we spent roughly $51 million. It's budgeted that this year we're going to hit somewhere around $53 million. One of the things we have is a fuel reserve account this year that they've put in the budget, again, which is nothing more than a slush fund. But it's $1.5 million, and I'm sure that there's no family out there who has said, okay, I'm going to have to put X amount aside just for fuel differences. Well, we do two things. One, we look at how do we gain efficiencies in fuels. A couple of ways to do that. One, on a hot day, you don't leave your car running for an extra 30 minutes while you're eating your lunch in it. We don't leave ambulances running while they're sitting outside a restaurant. Certain little things like that help. If you've been past Great Neck Middle School, we do things like, oh, we shut off the lights at night. Well, hasn't happened yet, but sooner or later we will shut off the lights at night over there. Sooner or later. But there are a lot of things, and then on the other side we have citizens call in and say, hey, the lights on this tennis court over here, they're not going off at 11 o'clock at night. They're with nobody over there, they're coming on around 8 o'clock at night, they're going until 6 a.m. Well, that's an easy one to fix. We had a bad timer on that. So a citizen sent me an email, I turned around, went to public works folks, whoever's in charge of that. They went out, they said, oh, it's a bad switch. So they fixed that, replaced the timer. Some of the things in the budget this year. School board's proposing a 3% salary increase to stabilize salaries. City is not recommending any pay increases whatsoever. We have personnel increases and reductions throughout on both sides, pretty balanced. All departments are reducing their training and travel budgets by 10%. Oh, wait a minute, sorry, that was 2009 and 10. We haven't reduced it since then. The city's implementing a hiring freeze. Oh, wait a minute, I recommended that 2 years ago and we still haven't done a hiring freeze. My recommendation was we do a hiring freeze for everything except critical positions, public safety, human services with critical positions, just like business. On businesses, how many businesses are going out and hiring folks as they need to be replaced? Only those critical positions are those being replaced right now. The city needs to jump on that bandwagon. After July 1st, 2010, new city employees were required to contribute 5% toward their retirement. That's great because that's something that I think I was pushing since 2007. But we've implemented it there. Some other statistics. You know, we live in the best city in the world, and I'm never going to say anything against our city because we've got a great city. I will tell you that we could, as in every budget, we could manage a little bit better. We could be a little more efficient. But there are other outside indicators that we really need to understand. Income of people moving into Virginia Beach as is going out of Virginia Beach. Well, in the city's budget, we have a lot of the statistics in here that aren't reported for 2010 or 11 because it says data is not available. But if you look at our economic development side, the data is available. Our economic development people are somehow getting this data. Basically, from 2005, folks who leave the city are making more than folks who move into the city. We really need to be concerned with that. 2010 and 11, the average change in your residential real estate property went down. Median household income. We're saying that these statistics show that in 2009 it was $59,000 a year, down from 2008, which was $65,000 a year. But in 2010 it was up to $64,000 a year. Excuse me. Now keep in mind the average annual income of a city employee with benefits is $68,000 a year. It says for 2011 data is not yet available. However, on our economic development website we show that that data is available. And our economic development guys are saying that it's gone down again. Per capita income, we reported as going down roughly from 2007. This isn't anything, it's not a new surprise to anyone. We expect it to go down this year. 2012, it should stabilize and start going up in 2013-14 if you look at the economic indicators. Unemployment rate, 2005 we were at 3.3%, 2006 2.9%, 2007 2.7%, and it's consistently been going up. It's about between 6 and 6.5% today. So let's look at, I know a lot of things come up here. We talk about how much money we're dumping into the oceanfront, convention center hotels, $200,000 for a new wall up in the restaurant to kind of shake that off and put a 1,500 square foot additional conference center in the West End. If you've had a chance to walk in there and you take a look at it, and if you've got any kind of construction background, you'll be able to look at it and say, geez, I think that costs about $30,000, because that's the true cost of it. Yet the city was charged $200,000 for it, and it said, well, city council didn't vote for this. In effect, we did vote for it when we voted for the town center agreement that allowed Otto Hoffler to make these changes without ever going to the city council or taxpayers to spend this money. Do I agree with it? Absolutely not. Am I going to try to change that in the budget this year? Absolutely. So we look at some of these things, but direct tax revenue generated from tourism in millions. So we're saying the last number we have reported is 2010. We're saying it's $76.5 million. So if you look at what we put into the oceanfront, tourism advertising, and everything else, and this is just direct tax revenue, we're saying, well, for every dollar spent, you know, there's another $1.50, $1.70, $17, 10 gazillion dollars, you know, depending on who you're talking to and which statistical multiplier they want to use. There's a bunch of them in there. But direct tax revenue generated from tourism, about $76.5 million. 2010, we spent almost 3 times that in tourism advertisement, debt service to our tourism projects, and money to the oceanfront for different tourism type activities. Let's look at a couple of other things. The ARP, and you'll see on our list, the ARP is a factor this year. The last 5 years, 6 years, you've noticed that I've always said we need to put it on a strategic pause. We need to reduce it. We need to take advantage of what we've done over the last 5 years, 10 years, 12 years, depending on which year. We've pretty much gone from 0 to 9,000 acres, right under 9,000, 8,900 acres. Well, actually, we are up to 9,000 based on what we did this past voting Tuesday, the Tuesday before last. So basically, from 2003, we had 3,000 acres in there. Today, we have 9,000 acres in there. I don't see a big land rush down in that area. I certainly don't. I don't see houses popping up left and right in the agricultural zone. We need to take a strategic pause and stop the program. Right now, there's $8.9 million in the program. John's going to get into this as well. We're putting another 4.33 into it this year. It takes $2.1 million to service the debt. So you look at that, that's $14 million. You need $2.1 million of it to service the debt. How about taking about $5 to $7 million of it out of that program, put it on a strategic pause, don't take any additional land in there, and then use that money to fund the schools. And the schools are only one of the areas. I mean, how many of you have been to the Bow Creek Rec Center in the last year? Anyone? 1, 2. Do you think that we really need to spend $25 million this year to bulldoze it down and replace it? We could probably wait 5 to 10 years before we do that, right? Probably. Strategic pause. Save that $25 million. Anyways, John's going to get into some more of this, but year over year I talk about things like SNAP program. How many people were on it last year? How many people year over year? SNAP is the same as food stamps, so the old food stamps program. We've gone, and I'll just hit like the highlights on this. We've gone from 2009, 20,000 families to 2010, 27,000 families to 2011, 31,000 families. What does that tell you? That tells you that the declining income of our individual families, the expendable income of our individual families is declining. So when that happens, how do you think our families feel with us raising taxes right now? You're taking more declining income. You're going to drive these numbers up further. Let's take a strategic pause. We can save easily $75 to $100 million this year without impacting one core service. Percent of individuals living in poverty. Well, it's gone from, in 2007, 6.4% to 7.5% 2010. The data I saw had 2011 at 8 or 9%. It's not listed in here. It says data's not available, but The Economist and there's a few other publications that actually list it. It's gone up, and it's things like, taxes. I've got a better idea. How about we look at things like the V-poll tax? We look at other taxes, eliminate them, and let our businesses create jobs. The government doesn't create sustainable jobs. The government creates jobs that you as a taxpayer have to pay for year over year over year. How about doing this? Let's focus and let the private industry create the jobs. That lowers our unemployment, it raises the level of taxes that the city can actually collect, but what we need to do is create an environment that fosters and helps our businesses create jobs and expand. If you look at Steel Incorporated, when we did away with the machinery and tools tax, they added on over 500 employees here in Virginia Beach. That's a lot of jobs. The average annual income at Steel Incorporated is $45,000 a year. That's a lot of jobs, okay? This is what we need to do. We need to foster and help our businesses grow this way. Now, if you look at our budget, and you look at some of the budget presentations, you'll see 12 different groups in the city all claiming, we created these 500 jobs at Steel. Well, if each of those 12 departments did it, then we've got 6,000 new jobs, but they all claim that they've done it. It's 500 jobs, and it was done because you had folks on city council willing to push the ball down the road, take the bullet, and eliminate the machinery and tools tax. Had we done that with the V-poll tax, you would have seen that tremendous amount of businesses across the city of Virginia Beach doing the same thing. This year's the 100th anniversary of it, the 200th anniversary of it, of the V-poll tax. It's time we eliminate it. So let's look at a couple of other things. Students on free or reduced lunches. We show that it's gone from 31 to 30%, so down about 1%. Children receiving free dental services. This is another economic indicator that you've got to really look at hard. TANF grants. The children receiving dental benefits has gone from basically 1,300 people in 2009 to 1,400 people this year. And that's because we have a waiting list for that service as well. TANF, basically, that's basically housing assistance or housing subsidies. We've gone from 1,096 to 1,175 right now. So that's projected for 12-13 to 1180 this year. I don't see that going down. I see that actually going up. This is another one. You know, we have awesome rec centers here. A couple of things I have a problem with our rec centers are this. One, I don't think we need to replace the aerobic equipment every 3 years. I don't think we need to replace the anaerobic or the weights every 5 years. It's a rec center. If you want brand new equipment, go to Anytime Fitness or 24-Hour Fitness or Life Fitness or go to one of the local gyms. If you go to a rec center, the average age should be like it is in Richmond, DC, Kansas City, New York. It should be around 7.5 to 10 years. It should not be competing with our private gyms. It's ridiculous.
Hey, I go to a rec center.
There you go. Look at this. From 2000 and we'll go 2009, 573 people had reduced cost. Thank you. 573 people had reduced cost to the rec centers. This year, for 2011, it was 1,370 people. So that tells me that 1,370 people have gone in and proven that they cannot afford to pay the full price of our rec center. We've got some issues. And the rec center should not be competing with private industry. Rec center, but here's the other thing, rec center membership is down. We've gone from 2009-10, since that's one of the indicators I'm using, 47,000 down to last year, 38,000. So with attendance at the rec centers down, we've got 3 times the amount of people getting either free or reduced rec center costs, memberships. That's ridiculous. This tells you what's happening in the community. So why are we going to place a further burden on our families, a further financial burden by raising taxes? It's ridiculous. Well, I can go on, but John and I have spent quite a bit of time looking at where do we reduce funding. And I'm going to let John go into the specifics. And if he needs any backup or any help, you know, I've got those numbers as well. And excuse me, the good thing is you don't have to sit through me punching through a PowerPoint of it this year, since I had, you know, I just pulled this together last night this morning. So with that, I'm going to introduce my friend and cohort on City Council, John Moss, and I've got to tell you, he's made my job a lot easier. One of the fun things we do is on emails, if I send in an email to the city manager for a request for something, I put John as a courtesy copy. He does the same thing. So we see the same information at the same time. The other thing is, if I'm not real happy with a response I see that's the city manager has tried to blast John, I blast back on the city manager saying, hey, that's not what you're hired to do. We need to be respectful of our elected officials who, you may not like it, but they are elected to represent the citizens of Virginia Beach. They're not there to represent the staff or do what the city manager wants. They're there to do what you want. We're elected by you, for you, and it's a government of representatives. We represent you. We represent the taxpayer, and I've just told you that the taxpayers cannot afford a tax increase. We have all the economic statistics right here saying we cannot afford it. So John's going to give you some specifics now that we put together. John?
I'll keep it short. This is thank you, Bill, very much. This is a good follow-up to Senator Jeff Waters last week. You know, because what he talked about was he gave himself a C in terms of really getting efficiency, in terms of really cutting as much spending as they could. Because there is a lot of inertia in all budgets. And when people say what the budget is, it's this times 2 more documents. It's probably 1,500 pages of stuff that you go through. And but Jeff did a good job last week. But I just want to go back to a point that, and I know Ashley and Dennis know this, Sam knows this, but actually the number of economically disadvantaged students went from 29% in 2010 to 34.6% in 2011 and 12, and goes up in 13. So we really are not, the bottom line, we are not as wealthy as a community as we were 2 years ago, and nothing's happened but increasing per capita income. And you know what they say, it's the math. If you're spending more on A, it means B must be taking a licking, and that's the residents. We are having to reduce our standard of living. So let's go and talk about a couple things. But the first of all, I want to give the General Assembly and the Governor credit for the first two items that helped us reduce our spending. One, they did allow us to rephase the catch-up for VRS versus doing it all at one time. We can spread it out over 5 years. And on the city and school side, that saves $6 million. Additionally, there was an increase in state funding for schools of $4 million. So that's $10 million. We're already eliminated 2 of the 4 cents, and we haven't even started looking at the budget yet. I think that's important. Now we talk about a couple other things. The city is going to buy $1 million more of vehicles. They're going to increase the purchases of vehicles by $1 million. I think they can do like we do at home and make the old cars and old trucks work another year. And that's an easy $1 million to save, and no one notices the difference. I mean, this is not like a hardship being imposed upon workers or community. So now you're at $11 million. The city is going to increase mass transit spending by $1 million because they're adding 3 new routes. Well, Bill and I said, well, let's find the least productive routes that you have, break even, and we'll even give you some dollars for a fuel cost because HRT has paid fuel just like we do. And so we said, okay, we'll just take $500,000, $500,000 right there. I'm going to pick some of the bigger ones so we don't spend on minutia. But what I do want to pick up on is 29 people that will work for you get a $6,000 a year car allowance. Now, the CEO of the aircraft carriers, Admiral Harvey, they don't get car allowances, and I know their jobs are equally responsible. They just take their pay and get their own car, driving back and forth to work. I think they can too. And 2 people are getting $10,000 car allowances. So that's a small amount, $185,000. But I think moral high ground is important, and I think if you're going to ask the people at the bottom to take a sacrifice, the people at the top should have some skin in the game. And Bill and I are in favor of reducing council salaries if we can find some funds to go along with us. Now, Bill, we talked about vacancies, and we were conservative. You know, I think if we were really pressed, we could take even bigger reductions, but we only identified about a 25% of the vacancies. Some of them is vacant as long as 6 months. That yields $2 million. In all fairness, we also thought the school board could find some compression in that area also, so we gave them a $500,000 credit for what we call labor efficiency on the non-instructional side for looking at their non-instructional vacancies as well. Like I said, everybody has skin in the game. But here is an area, we talked a lot about how the city, one thing Bill didn't mention, the city's only forecasting 0.3% population growth over 5 years. That's 800 people a year, 232 families roughly. So we probably think that we don't have a lot of strategic growth happening, but yet the city's spending about $30 million on the strategic growth areas in the next budget. So we went aggressively after money that was being spent on soft studies such as design and consultant studies, and that generated $3.5 million. And clearly no one next year would notice a difference if we didn't have a bunch of public hearings coming out looking at pretty pictures on proposals that no one's moving in to go do anything with. I think we could take a pause on that. The rec center alone is $25 million. That's big bucks. Now obviously you don't save $25 million because we're paying that with debt service, so you got to go look at the debt service amount. But that's in the $1 million range, so there's some real money there. Now here's one that's kind of interesting. The city's going to go to, or wants to go to bi-weekly pay. Today we pay on the 15th and the 30th. They want to go to bi-weekly. That costs $1.8 million. I'm certain that's an investment that we can forego for a while, because I don't think that's certainly added value to anyone except the consultants and the people that do the work. So I'm sure that's one we can go for. Another thing, the city buys lots of property. But it's interesting when they have these little things and they'll say various site acquisitions. So when Bill and I asked them, well, what exactly do you plan to buy? Well, we don't know, it's just in case if we decide to buy something. Well, how about we just decide not just to tax people and save $1.3 million? That sounds really, really good. And the Agricultural Reserve Program gives us about $2 million in this year if we just look at the money that we raise every year from it. But there's also about another,
It's 4.3.
well, 4.4, but if we just took half, we could take $2 million of it. And
The whole thing,
I'll
we
take
got
the
a
whole
big
thing.
reserve.
But over for compromise there, here, I don't hear it's out there somewhere. But also, there's a reserve around 8.5. We think there's $7.5 million to help us do things like the Kentsville Old Donation Gifted Center without having to use public participation and borrow money. That saves debt service. So when you go through this whole list that we have, it's about $55 million. That's a lot of money, and we haven't really finished. And the point being is, when we tried to get a resolution to get the city manager to deliver a no tax increase budget, we only had 5 friends. I think because they didn't want to show us what was the art of the possible. And I'm not saying these things wouldn't deliver value to our citizens. We would never forget to say that. The key is, in these struggling economic times, how do you ask people to pay for things that aren't truly needed? And that is really the case of it. And these aren't really hard things, and that's what's amazing. Why would someone think that we could buy $1 million more vehicles and that's worth raising taxes over?
That's $1 million more than last year.
Last year.
Well, last year.
And that's what you have to ask yourself is, what was it? And then in one of these cases, we were there, and the guy had this big number. It was like a $6 million number. It was the same number every year for 6 years. Now, how many people think there's a lot of thought behind that number? Or you get 3 projects in this book, and every single one of them has $300,000 for design, $1.2 million for construction. It's the same funding profile for 3 projects in a row. Only thing that changed the description. Do you think there's a lot of analytical discipline behind that number? And then when we asked him about it, he says, oh, well, we need to update that. We did that last November. So they're acknowledging that they gave us a budget that did not have the most updated information, and yet they're asking us and recommending us to raise your taxes. This is what we are dealing with. The inertia is to spend and to tax, not to think about who the real customer is. And I think we ought to be doing just what the General Assembly did, just what Jeff McWaters talked about, and he said about a C-. Today, I give us an F, because we aren't even beginning to touch the little stuff. The little stuff. And that doesn't mean everything that Ashley and Sam have in their budget we would jump on top of, because we wouldn't. But they have been much better stewards of the money than we have been. Much better stewards, and I compliment them all the time on what a good job that they do on their nationally ranked school system. They deserve more funding, and Bill and I are going to work hard to make sure that people understand it's possible without a tax increase.
One last thing, then we'll open it up for questions. And the Bow Creek Rec Center, the $25 million, that's not included in the 55 John talked about. One other thing that's not included in there, right now the average position in the city of Virginia Beach is $68,000 with expenses. So that's your average employee. On the city side, we have currently 275 open positions. Of those, less than 1/4, excuse me, are for public safety. So, and some of them have been updated every 6 months. What happens is, or have been open for 6 months, what happens is, when I scrubbed this 4 years ago, I came in and said, hey, these positions have been open for 5 years, these positions have been open for 10 years. If we haven't filled them in 10 years, you don't need them. If you haven't filled them in 5 years, you really don't need them. There was an edict put out by the city manager after I spoke at this breakfast and brought it up at council, that if a position has been open for 6 months or longer, the department director has to go in and review and update that position so it shows as new again. So just so you know, that's what's going on. The other thing we do is whether you use that, if you've got 275 open positions, you're funded for all 275 open positions, whether you fill them or not. So if you don't fill those positions, that's money left over every year. This year, it's roughly between $13 and $14 million of funding for positions that was not used. So again, it's another way to use it as a slush fund. One other thing you need to know. For every police officer, for every 9 police officers, we have 1 planner. For every 3.5 firefighters, we have 1 planner. We're only growing at 800 people a year. What do you need that many planners for? And where we have added people are code enforcement individuals. Well, there's a study out that talks about what all their jobs and responsibilities are. There's 4 separate types of code enforcement, code administrators. They go through the exact same type of training. So I'm recommending we take 3 of those groups and combine them together into 1. That alone will save $1.5 million. Again, that's not in here yet. I'm waiting for the city to come back and verify that that's the true savings on it. The last verbal I got back on that was it'll take 3 to 6 months to verify that. I said, how about take a week, give me a better estimate, and it's okay if you're off by $100,000 one way or another. It's not that hard. With that, let's open it up for questions because we're here to represent you.
Okay, we're going to begin with Gene. And before we begin, ladies and gentlemen, direct your question to either Bill or John or both, so we'll know. Thank you.
Yeah, because both we can answer together. We can answer everything. I don't want to just. Yeah, we're the smarter guys up here.
Okay, here's the question.
To who? To who?
Bill, you're the chief. This bill, this budget reminds me of the health bill. And it's so complex. Who has time? Who can understand it? I congratulate you both and go through all that paperwork, all those committees. My God, it's amazing how hard you work. We appreciate that bill so much, but here's the question. How can we simplify something? It's coming all over the country. We need to simplify the health laws. We need to simplify back to the Constitution, like you started today. Back to the Constitution. So I don't know if it's going to happen because it's a national concern. But in my opinion, I wouldn't ask you what your opinion. But in my opinion, we should increase the luxury tax. Not when people need it, and that means cigarettes, alcohol, fur coats, jewelry, yachts. They can raise some taxes, but...
I better hide my watch.
Okay, that's all right.
Okay. Let's hit the budget first of all. The budget, it's honestly, it's complicated, but it's not that complicated if you read it. You have to read it and understand it. It's not that complicated. There's a lot of pages, there's a lot of minutia written in there. It doesn't need to be there. Once you boil it down, John and I went through almost the entire CIP in 3 hours in one afternoon, scrubbed through it, literally page by page. It takes time. Both of us read it beforehand, so we were familiar with it, but it takes time to go through it. And it's so easy just to blast through it if you take the time and dedicate to it. The reason our budget looks like this is to scare you. It's to make it look complicated. It's to make it look like, oh God, do I really want to even look at this and open it up? Okay, once you open it up, it's like a proposal. It's like, anything else. You open it up, a big dictionary, this is a big dictionary, that's all it is. You open it up, it's not that complicated. Start reading it, you're like, oh, wait a minute, hey, this isn't bad. That's how I found out we were spending $1.85 million to go from bi-monthly to bi-weekly on the payroll system. It's worked for 40 years. Why can't we put it off for another 5 years? There's no urgent need to do it right now. So, and again, John and I are getting together. I think it's tomorrow afternoon to go through the rest of the budget. We're actually going to rewrite some of the policies in the back. But it's not that complicated. It is written like it is written to confuse people and to scare people away from reading it. That's it. That's it. Not difficult.
Next question from Bill.
For Bill and DeSteph, Bill, you said the average salary was $68,000.
It's with benefits. It's $68,000. It's actually $67,890 something, but it's right at. I call it $68,000.
And for Steel, which is a profit-making corporation, they just hired 500 people at an average of $43,000.
That's correct.
Why don't we recommend that Steel goes to $68,000, and then they could last for about another year and they'd leave? Is that something like a good idea?
Well, Thomas Jefferson once said, when those who serve us are paid more than those who are paying in for those who serve us, we need to be concerned.
Yep.
We need to be concerned right now because the average annual income on a city employee is higher than the average annual income of a citizen of Virginia Beach, a family. And we really need to look at that. It is wrong. Oh, in there, what John, one of the things I threw on there today, I think it was today, was reduce the city manager's salary 25%, put it in line with those who are public servants and equivalent to him. You know, he's a public servant. He's there to serve us. He's not the CEO of a company being held responsible. He is there to serve us. If you wanted to make $500,000 a year, go work in public service, or go work out in the private industry. You know, put in more than 70 hours a week.
All right, next question is from Chris.
Chris.
I'm going to sort of address Jeannie's thing about how I look at the budget from top down, and I'm going to reiterate some of the things you said, and I'm going to ask a question that perhaps hasn't been asked so far. When I looked at the budget, 10 years ago, the city spent $1.2 billion. Now we've got a $1.7 billion budget. If you just start with a 2.5% inflation rate over that period of time, you should be at about $1.5 billion. So there's $200 million that went someplace. Could be unfunded mandates, could be other things, but it's $200 million. And at that point in time, our population has remained flat, and our school enrollment's gone down, the two principal drivers. Then if you look at the people that work in this city, the median wage is $32,000 per year, yet the median household income is about $61,000 or $62,000, meaning there are two people working in every home, and during that period of time, their cost of living has gone up about $2,500 a year in fuel, food, etc., and their house values dropped $18,000 a year. So that frames that question. So here's the real thing. I saw in the media everybody was upset because nobody came out to Cox and stood up and said, hey, we're against this budget. Well, for me, I've come out 2 years and I've stood up against the budget, and all I hear is that we have a public relations problem. If they speak long enough, they're going to convince us how good things are. So I want to focus in, and this is my question, on recreation centers. For 2 years, and I'm going to offend some people, but I don't believe recreation centers are a core function of government. I do not believe that they're a core function of government. Now, 2 years ago, when we were looking at building and doing these things, nobody would do anything about it. So now we're looking at building it, but here's the problem. If you look at that budget, this year we're starting to staff all the things we built the last 2 years that we shouldn't have ever done 2 years ago. So all we do is compound the problem going forward, saying, well, now we've got it, we've got to make it work. So that's point one. And then the second one, and I want you to comment on this, is I believe that at my age, I can go to the rec center, and for $9 a month, I can join the rec center. So for $100 a year, I can go to a first-class place. 2 years ago, I quit my wine membership at $59 a month because I couldn't afford it, okay? And so when I looked at this budget, I called some friends in Northern Virginia. I don't believe we should be in this business, but up there they charge like $70 a month to join the gym. So if you're going to compete with the Y, at least charge the prices of the Y, okay? And get the money back. So I'd like to see, I guess my question is this, starting with the fee-based things that you support, whether it's the sportsplex, whether it's the farmers market, whether it's the rec centers, whether it's the museums, why don't we start raising the rates there for people to go in and attend those things, and at the same time look at privatizing or outsourcing those things to the private sector.
Want to reply to that?
This guy should be running into city council and joining us because, Bill and I have been talking about privatization not only of the rec centers, but of the convention center. There's a lot of things that we should be looking at because of unfortunately today, the high benefit costs that the General Assembly is still imposing on us because we cannot not have DSRS. We cannot have a defined contribution program today. we should not be having any employees not delivering core services that are touching the customer in a very personal way. We should be looking at the private sector delivering goods and services. Getting back to your point, how did we get here? Because when people 2 years ago told you about the Williams Rec Center, no one said, oh, and by the way, we're going to have to hire 22 new people 2 years from now, and then we're going to tell you that that's part of the reason why we're raising taxes is because of adding personnel. Because they what? Will bid you on what the thing is. And personally, as nice as it isn't something that we should have built. I know it's not popular. We could have done it differently at a lower cost. There's a lot of things with these places, but you're right. I don't disagree with you about people and competing, but now it's like, where are we at? Nothing would still keep us, that doesn't open for 2 years, nothing would still keep us from looking at privatization of that facility. And we're talking about some of those things. Yep. But we need to encourage you because you're the people who make us be there. So in fact, you're the customer that drives the behavior of City Council. The convention hotel proved that when the people speak, the earwax melts and people can't listen and do the right thing. But that has to be your voice. But I want to compliment the lady Diane Howard. She's not here today, but she spoke at the public hearing, and she went through a list of $20 million worth of stuff they could cut, and she went through it just like that. She had done her homework, and it was a great, great tribute to the quality of people in Virginia Beach, but she really walked right through it, how we could save the money, and she clearly had spent some time looking at this. But as Bill said, we about $15 million we could save by privatization.
Just hand them over to the YMCA.
But that is, it will make some people not happy. But I think what Jeff Waters and other people are saying is, if we're going to get the cost structure of government down where we can afford it, we have to make some serious changes.
Let's move on.
Move on, next question. Andy, directed to one person.
Okay, John, because Bill's been given a couple more. On Wednesday, I asked, is there a way to be able to prioritize all of the lines in the budget so that when we, like in my household, we don't do it by function, we just do it by, okay, we gotta pay the mortgage, and we gotta buy food, and gotta buy car insurance, but then we get down to, well, we want to go to Europe. Well, that went away because that was at the bottom. So is there a way to rank order and prioritize the budget of the city so that we can actually say these bottom things are what's really driving the tax increase? It's not a debate between schools and safety. It's these people, these planners maybe down at the bottom that we don't need. How can we do that?
Well, the start of that process was the very resolution that Bill and I put forward, is to tell the manager to what? Number one, develop a no tax, no fee increase budget, because that sets the cap, just like family's income is capped. And secondly, you give guidance just like the governor gives to his executive departments, and you tell them, these are the things that you fund first, and then tell us what else you can do. And then you can fall out. It's not that hard. But if you have become a defender of the status quo, and everyone knows a good leader can never afford to be an advocate for the status quo. They have to be an advocate for the customer who pays the bill. And we do not have a council majority that is an advocate for who pays the bill and is willing to recognize there is a limited physical capacity to finance government. Plain and simple.
Next question is from Sam.
I've got a really easy question. Can you guys get all this information in an editorial or something in the newspaper, get the word out so that folks throughout the city can see this instead of just groups like us? Really get the word out. I think an editorial, or maybe if you get a newspaper reporter to actually do a story on this, would be fantastic. And I appreciate the work you're doing. Thank you.
What about a whole page?
Well, the only way to do it would be to take it out now, but I'll be honest with you. We sat down with Carrie Dougherty 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago on a Monday, I spent almost 3 hours with her going through the entire budget, what was there, how to get through the whole thing. And the bottom line, we used to have 507 taxes and fees. If we accept the budget the way it is today, you'll have 554. And the fees and taxes, they're not going down, they're going up. So we really need to get control of spending, and it's not that hard to do. We walked you through today, and just, John walked you through 55 million. I threw out a couple of other things to bring it up to 75. We can bring it up to 100 million. It's not that difficult, and I feel so bad for the school board people who come up saying, hey, you know, we need this, we need this, we need this. I'm like, you know, I can get through this budget. You need 25 million? I can find it, give me 20 minutes. And I'm not being sarcastic. I'm not being arrogant. I'm telling you that our wants versus our needs. We're going to spend $67 million on a convention center hotel. We're going to spend $40 million subsidizing the Dome site. We're going to spend $63 million more for Bruce Thompson's last project. We don't have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem. We don't need to raise your taxes. We need to get control of what we're doing. You know, and Jimmy, you know, just Jimmy's defense, you know, I've been joking around, and if you see this come up, it came from me because I started playing with it. You know, a little song to Beverly Hillbillies, well, the first thing you know, Barb's a millionaire, the first kin folks say, Barb, move away from there. Well, you know, with the Agricultural Reserve program, we are taking somebody who started that program and making them a millionaire, and I'm 100% against that personally.
Next question from Jim.
Buddy, I've been catching hell for that. Bill, John, are we the problem? Because I look around this room, and Chris, you don't think you upset some people? I look around this room, and I see a lot of faces in here that I see on Saturday mornings that I don't see at the city council meetings, I don't see at the budget meetings, and I don't see you taking our elected leaders to task for what they've done, and yet I saw a lot of hands go up to vote Will Sessoms as a mayor of this party. So my question is, are we the problem, and what do we got to do to get their attention? I've done everything I can.
We're the problem because we elected Sessoms.
It's questions, it's not statements, please, ladies and gentlemen, it's questions.
I don't think the customer is never the problem. And I can understand when people are working as hard as they do, maybe 2 jobs, and it costs $8 worth of gas to get the public hearing, and they're not certain that it's not going to change anything. They are being very rational, and probably, I don't blame them for not showing up. The question we need to do is how we need to make it easier using technology that they can tell us whether websites or blogs, so they don't have to travel to communicate to us. But the message that really counts, the public hearing that really counts, is Tuesday, November 6th. If you don't like people who work for you, you fire them. And that is the power of the customer, and that's the power that counts.
Next question is from Brad.
You can't fire. What's his name, Sport?
No, we've tried this fire sport. We don't have 6 votes for it, but we've had 5. And if you give me a couple more people to work with, we can fire sport.
That actually touches on my question. You mentioned a lot of ideas this morning. You're talking about a complete overhaul of the ARP program. You're talking about an elimination of the B poll tax, which as a business owner, I'm totally in favor of, but that's taking revenue out of the system, quite frankly. If you ask me personally, I'd like to see a couple $100,000 more dollars go into the historic houses in the Arts and Humanities Commission, because those are tourism drivers. We all have different ideas here, and you all need to be congratulated for the work that you've done. But without 4 more votes on council, all these ideas are basically worth nothing. And I really honestly wonder, do you two have a strategy of finding 4 more votes and having any of these ideas, mine, yours, Jimmy's, whoever's, Chris's, find any light of day?
Well, when John and I first threw out the thing to do a 0 tax increase and have the city manager do that in the budget, it started as John came to me with it. I said, yeah, it's a great idea, let's push it. We had 5 votes on that, and 5 votes sends a strong message. May not win the day on that one, but it sent a strong enough message that the city manager was back there trying to provide information to us without a tax increase. So they did have the budget prepared both ways, just in case. What do we do, honestly? And I've said, hey, if you're going to raise the taxes, raise it 50 cents, raise it $1 per 100. Why? Because that's what we need to get people off their butts to get out and vote and change the way we're doing this. short of that, I can't tell you. Every year, this is the sixth year I've gotten up in front of you and showed you how we don't need a tax increase. And actually, for the 6 years, we haven't increased your taxes. So maybe getting out to all the community centers, all the civic leagues and everything else has helped a little bit over the last 6 years, because every year the city manager presents a budget with a tax increase. We've yet to increase your taxes. So maybe we won't increase them this year. But I've got to tell you, it starts with what we're doing here today. And I've handed, and we will hand the list to every member of council, and they'll take probably 50% of our tax recommendations, our tax cuts, and they'll implement them into the mayor and vice mayor's little thing they come out with saying, oh, look, we found all this money, we didn't need to raise your taxes. That's happened the last 6 years. Of course, the last 2 years we stole money from the schools, but hopefully we won't do that this year. We shouldn't, we don't need to. We have plenty of money out there. It's wants versus needs, and we really need to focus on that.
All right, thank you, Bill. Next question is from Al.
Bill, in your earlier presentation, you cited a number of statistics, most of them showing how how we're declining in a number of different areas. My question is, are we using the same measurements over the past 5, 6 years, or wherever the source of those statistics are, so that we're measuring them consistently?
Yeah, we actually are. The only time we've changed that is when we came out with the convention center showing how much and how wonderful the convention center was doing. We went with the ODU study for, I think it was 16 years straight. We didn't like the way that trend was going last year. So what we did, we said, hey, we got to find a new model. So we went to a new model that showed, oh, well, actually it's looking a little better. And it was down in it was a footnote, in a subnote to a footnote that said we had changed that. And when I picked up on that and brought it up, they were somewhat embarrassed and said, yeah, well, we didn't like the way that was going anymore. And I was like, so you didn't like the way it's working for the last 17 years, you didn't like the trend, so we decided to do it differently and account for it differently now. They're like, well, kind of, yeah. So we started using Smith Travel numbers, who we pay as a travel service, instead of ODU, who we really didn't pay. And I believe the ODU number was consistent because they use the same methodology and same algorithm, where Smith Travel uses a different one, so it makes it look better.
Okay, next question.
The other ones are all the same, though, Al. Thank you.
Bill, John, I'll bet there's a lot more money than that or a lot more budgets in the entire budget that is not looked at, and they're just passing it along from year to year and sticking all of us. You ought to just try to force them to get a 3% budget reduction, just flat reduction, let the other people figure out which ones to cut. You can't go through everybody's budget and look at it and be as competent at looking at the individual expenses as the people that are in charge of those expenses. So you just reduce the thing by a flat 3% and let them decide which ones they want to cut.
You're absolutely right. Here's where it works and here's where it doesn't work. It does not work with clerk of the court, who is Tina Sinnen, who is all personnel. There's nothing in her budget except for personnel. Right now they're well undermanned. They've got too much work to do. They have a hard time catching up. You can't cut her budget 3%. It would devastate her.
And they're still the best circuit court in the state.
Yeah, and on the other hand, our police department, and I've been one saying, hey, public safety, there are sacred cows, don't mess with them, don't mess with them. Well, this year, we added another deputy chief, and if you talk to all 3 deputy chiefs and say, what do you do? There's one of them who says, I have no idea. I sit here at this desk, I have no idea. Well, we probably didn't need to add that 3rd deputy chief at $160,000 a year. And we've got a couple of other things in police, fire, EMS, but what we're doing with those, and I'll be honest with you, we're going through, we're pointing out those errors, we're handing it over to the chiefs, and saying, hey, figure this out, figure out how you can scrub this a little bit better. And on the other fire station issue, they've done that on one. But here's one of the other things. Chicks Beach Fire Station, we built the new fire station. We've got, I believe it's $3 million in there to refurbish the old fire station. Why are we refurbishing the old fire station when we just built a new one? If it's going to be for another use, you know what? Put that off for 3 years. Put it off for 4 years. Save that $3 million. And that was that $3 million for refurbishment is cash that we have on hand. There's one other building we're doing that with. That again, I think that's part of what's in our budget for the $55 million. Okay, that is part of that.
Next question.
I'd like to hear from both you gentlemen on this question, since each of you know much more about this than any of us. The military or the Navy is certainly going to be declining in the next 3 to 5 years and perhaps beyond that. So because of that, we will suffer some significant decrease in tax revenue to the city. The question is, what are you guys going to do on City Council? What will City Council do to restructure our government to accommodate a potentially significant decrease in tax revenue? Thank you.
Well, this gets back to Brad's fundamental question about, how do you pay for the $40 million of the B-poll tax? If you were thinking ahead 5 years from now, maybe when that carrier moves from Norfolk to San Diego, and that's 1.5% of local GDP that we lose, what are we doing to, over time, compensate? Well, you say, wait a minute, if I think, like at your home, I can gain a lot of business and bring a lot of people here, I'd be looking for ways to carve out of that over the next 5 or 10 years, every year to eat that, not all at one time, right? Can't, it's too much, $40 million, but how do we get $5 million at a time, $6 million at a time, so at the end of 5 years, I have a plan to have it gone, and I can economically sell that to businesses, because businesses look for stability and to offset, because defense is going to be relatively flat, and that's 45% of our regional economy. So the other 55% has to grow phenomenally in order to feed the beast of government, allow us to be prosperous. So your point is all the more reason why status quo budgeting is a recipe for disaster, a recipe for declining personal discretionary income. And we'll have to do things like that to change the course of action, is to make those strategic reductions in risk-taking to free up the cash to make those fiscal policy changes that truly drive jobs. That's what drives jobs, a less expensive government.
Right. Next question is from the Admiral.
I have a comment and question. One thing, we have a very lackadaisical attitude on spending, which is on the City Council, but also we saw something happen not long ago. We saw a school bus pull into a 55 and older community on numerous occasions, and obviously for personal business. We passed that word on to high level in the school board, and it was kind of come see, come saw, which we were shocked. Okay, now I'll get on to my question. Is the money that we received from the state for the Oceana problem being wisely spent? It's a total of $15 million, I think, a year. We put up 7.5.
7.5.
Yeah.
That's a tough question when you say, is it being wisely spent? It's being spent. Would I spend it the exact same way it's being spent today? Absolutely not. But it is being spent.
That's good.
Yeah. What we are doing is, like over in Oceana Gardens in Sam's area, where a house is on a duplex lot, we are buying that, turning it into just a single-family home and reducing the potential occupancy or potential density down by 1. So that's kind of the methodology they're doing for it. Is there a smarter way to spend the money than buying like the Rock Church property and some of the other things? Probably, but strategically there's some great benefit in that. As they finish with redoing Ventress Field and that comes back online, you're going to see the interfacility traffic area pick up a lot. I mean, a tremendous amount. That will be our outline field for the next 10 to 15 years. And I believe that you're going to see the benefit there increase significantly. Is the money being spent wisely? That's very subjective, and we could probably do it better, but it's okay the way it is today.
All right. Next question is from Don.
Thanks for sharpening your pencils on this year's budget, but I have kind of a longer term question, probably for Bill to give a little more history. But you know, we always have a cycle of fat years and lean. Even the Bible talked about save up in the fat years for the lean years. So did the city have a plan for saving up or investing or whatever in the fat years to get through the lean years? Or how did we get here, and how do we not get here again 10 years from now?
I'd like to say that the city was pretty responsible with what they've done to save up for the fat years, but I would be misleading you if I told you that. However, and this is just by default, they've done this. The city has purchased a whole bunch of land and taken it off the tax rolls and kept it in the city rolls. So it's off the tax rolls. What we can do is start selling some of that land back strategically as we lay out what we want in specific areas and putting that land back on the tax rolls. That's one way to do it. We've taken down more open space and parkland than we can ever maintain. We spend between $3 and $5 million a year to maintain that.
Last year we took $17 million of property tax.
Yeah, so we took $17 million off the tax rolls last year. So by default, I would say that we can use that strategically by selling that back in the future. However, that was not the original plan by City Council. And if you remember in the previous years, whenever we had a surplus, I would always say, okay, let's use that money, put it against the CIP next year to offset what we see as next year's budget, because we know next year is going to be tough. And everyone's like, oh, that's doing one-time expenses. That's taking one-time money and using it in long-term things. That's irresponsible. Instead, let's do this. Let's spend $200,000 on a video wall at the convention center. Let's go spend $25,000 on a piece of artwork for the Sandler Center. I'm like, wait a minute, stop. And that stuff should be done by private industry. That should be done by donations. That should be done by the various groups. That should not be done by the taxpayers who have no role in that. So we've done things like that. We've done things like the little blow-up, big blow-up slides and stuff in our rec centers. Instead of patching them and making them last more than 2 years. And oh, by the way, some of our local pools operated by the YMCA have the same blow-up things that they've had 15 years ago, and they still work great. In the city, we wanted to refresh them every 2.5 to 3 years. And that was to the tune of right over $1 million, and I kind of put a halt on that. But they ended up going around me and using year-end fund balance to do that. So, you know, we have not planned the way, but because we've acquired and been so gluttonous in the leaner, in the more robust years, we have the opportunity now to sell off some of the land and look at some of the things we've done and, you know, kind of glide us through. Had we done what I recommended, which was use some of those surpluses to pay off our debt, things like that, and instead of increasing our debt last year, reduce our debt. And I gave 30 examples of different cities that were doing that. Majority of City Council did not want to do that, so we increased the debt. And so again, I was the only one voting against the budget because it was irresponsible for the direction we were heading. But because of that, to answer your question really easily, by default, we may end up having surplus land and surplus things that we can sell off as assets, but we've not planned for it the way we should have.
I'd like to follow up on that if I could, just because I want to give Ashley and the school board credit. During those boom real estate years, the schools really did reduce their budget, and that's how they put those savings aside, knowing that the lean days were coming. So what happened during this period of time when spending was going up in total significantly, it wasn't being driven by schools. We had city spending growing at 3 times the rate of the economy in the area, and then when that little addiction couldn't be fed, last 2 years, they had to go in and raid the school systems, legally the city's money, but the school systems retained earnings for the tough times, and now we're short. So I would say, though the city did some good things, the school board, to give them credit, have really demonstrated much more fiscal discipline and long-looking than we have. And we certainly could emulate their behavior, and I want to compliment them on what a good job they did.
Thank you. All right, we're going to take two more questions. One is from Christy, then I'm going to finish up with...
So much for all your hard work. John, this one is for you because you're a numbers guy. It seems to me that if you want to increase your tax revenue, you need to increase the number of people paying taxes. Apparently, our city growth is very, very minimal. An example for me would be me moving here from Atlanta. I was making $60,000 a year by myself, just salary. That wasn't all the benefits and all the extra everything. I moved here, I'm making a third of that. So it seems to me there's no incentive for anybody to move here. So as city councilman, what do you think would be the way to raise the income for the private sector so that we could attract more people, which would broaden the tax revenue base?
Jimmy, she really loves you.
Do you?
I love you, baby.
Well, as many people in this room know, once again, it gets back to these fiscal policy issues. Because in the end, two things enable an employer to charge a hard price. First of all, the customer who's got to be willing to pay it. So the goods and services have to be able to get a price that they can afford to pay higher labor. Those generally tend to have two characteristics. The job is either capital intensive, like steel, heavy investment where they have a lot of per unit production per worker, and therefore they can pay higher wages, or it's intellectually very intensive, doctor, lawyer, skill set, creativity such that they can pass off that higher labor cost in the marketplace. One thing has had a huge impact on wages. If you can put it over a wire or put it in a container, you're in a global labor competition in the marketplace, which has had a huge impact of suppressing wages, real wage growth on a global scale, which is why real wages over the last 2 decades for the average family have been flat in purchasing power. What we can do is what Bill talked about is remove the barriers. One, the VPOL tax. Reduce the number of planners so it doesn't take you 9 months to a year to get a development approved and get to start working to start making money. So you spend, even the vice mayor was lamenting how he spent $8,000 in engineering work to get his driveway because it'd just be bad. There's something wrong because that's non-productive use of assets. So that's what we have to do. Remove the barriers, lower the cost, and be business friendly, and the marketplace has to do the rest.
All right, the last question is from Jack.
Accolades to somebody down there at the city for taking the sportsplex private. It used to cost the city ballpark $750,000 a year.
1.5.
1.5? Okay, I've got old numbers. Now they're making money on it. But it maybe shouldn't have been built in the first place. I don't know. But anyhow, how can we take other things in the city, and Chris mentioned the rec centers, and I'm one of those old people that bought a life membership. I go there and don't pay anything, but they're competing with the kids around town. Are the rec centers making money, losing money? If they're losing money, how much? Do we want to privatize them?
We put about $15 million a year into rec centers with personnel and equipment and other things. That's outside of the CIP. At the CIP, you're probably up around $20, $25 million. The proposal we did last year, or 3 years ago, we did the privatization of the sportsplex, privatization of golf courses a year later. I've recommended privatization of rec centers, and that seems to be one of the really touchy, iffy subjects that Cindy Curtis goes through the roof on and Mr. Spohr goes through the roof on. But I've contacted the regional director of the YMCA and talked to him about this. It's something they would be very interested in. Their first step into our community was doing that joint pool down by the Princess Anne Commons area. So that's their first step into Virginia Beach with YMCA, really expanding beyond the other two traditional historic YMCAs, one at Hilltop, one over by Mount Trashmore. So they are touching with this. I really think that if we turned over everything to the YMCA today, the way it is now, it would save you year over year about $20 million a year. But the YMCA could step in, operate it, create it, and do what we can't do. The city, I mean, every employee we have in the city, we pay not just their salary and benefits, we pay their VRS contribution, and, you know, they're here for, you know, forever, or a lot of them. Others, they leave early and they say, oh, you know, I'm going to find a private job and make a lot more money. More power to them, because that means they're paying more taxes and help us out a little bit more. But on that, I think that privatizing the rec centers is absolutely one of the things we need to focus on in the future, and the YMCA would be a great start. The one thing we have to do is make sure that we don't have Mr. Spoor or Cindy Curtis involved in that, because they would literally derail it from the beginning.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm round of applause for Councilman DeSteph and Councilman Moss.